Time now for us to take a look at what's grabbing headlines in the world's papers. I'm joined again by Clément Bonero. Morning again, Clément. Donald Trump, of course, as we know, was in Vegas, Las Vegas there, meeting with victims of the shooting on Sunday. That shooting reigniting again this debate on gun control. But you've spotted some articles that suggest that the two political parties there in the US are actually moving perhaps closer together on the issue.
Absolutely, and it's quite an unprecedented development in US politics, writes the Washington Post this Thursday. Usually it's the Democrats who lead the fight for tighter gun laws, but now, days after the worst mass shooting in recent US history, even the most avid supporters of the Second Amendment are saying that they're at least open to discussing new laws. One Republican senator even saying he supports banning certain accessories used in Sunday's shooting.
Indeed, because there had been bills being proposed that would actually make laws more lax, I believe. Again, this is not a new debate. It's been ongoing and resurges every time there is a shooting. As yet, though, nothing has changed. Is change ever really going to be possible in the US when it comes to gun control? Well,
the Dallas Morning News says yes, and argues that all Americans need to change their attitude towards gun violence. No one should be satisfied with the US homicide rate, they write, one of the highest in the developed world, and therefore everyone should support laws that seek to prevent gun violence. Now, of course, you can't solve all problems with a single measure, with a single law. The paper concludes the end point for this debate is not no guns, but we need to get somewhere other than here.
OK, now, Clément, I believe you've also spotted an article in a Swiss paper, Les Temps. Switzerland has the third highest number of guns per capita in the world, behind the US and Yemen. And yet there hasn't been a single mass shooting in Switzerland. Any reasons why?
Well, Le Temps interviewed a professor of criminology from the University of Lausanne, who explains that this discrepancy comes down to cultural differences between Switzerland and the US. There are actually fewer gun owners proportionally in the country compared to the US. Most gun owners are actually former members of the military who've had extensive training in using firearms and other weapons. Another crucial difference is also that in Switzerland, people don't see firearms as tools to protect their families, but simply as what they are, weapons that should be used only in the event of war.
OK. Well, let's move on to the UK now. British papers giving a lot of focus to Prime Minister Theresa May's speech that didn't go really exactly to plan.
That's right. Theresa May was hoping to reassert her Conservative leadership, but things went terribly wrong for her, as the Daily Mirror reports. The British Prime Minister had to battle losing her voice. She was interrupted mid-speech by a comedian who handed her a redundancy notice, and some of the letters fell off the conference stage backdrop behind her. An unfortunate series of mishaps, which the Daily Telegraph's cartoonist Matt compared to the 10 plagues of Egypt. You can see his cartoon here. Theresa May is on the stage and someone says, "Look, a plague of locusts."
Yeah, definitely not an easy hour for Theresa May. Moving on now to some other news. We're just hearing from the Iraqi army that it has freed the city of Hawija from the Islamic State group, one of the two last strongholds in that country. Iraqis now trying to turn their focus to rebuilding the country.
Absolutely. The London-based newspaper Al Arab writes that while the liberation of Hawija marks a major turning point in the war against the Islamic State group, it does not solve Iraq's many problems. The country faces considerable political instability, especially in the wake of the referendum on Kurdish independence, and also a lot of economic problems, including high unemployment.
And indeed, that issue of the Kurdish referendum independence, we're being told, will not be on the agenda today when Iraq's Prime Minister sits down with French President Emmanuel Macron. But already, even before they met, a lot of interest in that meeting.
Absolutely. Iraqi paper As-Sabah writes that the two leaders are expected to focus mainly on economic cooperation between the two countries, mainly arms deals. Iraqi officials are also expected to meet with heads of oil companies to secure new contracts. The paper regrets, though, that political issues will only be addressed very briefly.
OK, we are expecting the two men to give a joint press conference at 10 a.m. Paris time, so we'll be covering that. But Clément, I believe we can end with a chilling story from Indonesia. A man was attacked there by a giant python on the island of Sumatra and beat all the odds by not only surviving the fight, but also managing to kill the python.
Indeed, and here's a picture of the 8 meters long python. Absolutely frightening. The man, as you said, survived, was badly injured. He did, however, celebrate his victory by chopping up the snake, frying it and eating it.
I'm absolutely bowled away by the size of that python. I can't even imagine how he started to take that on. But interestingly, python attacks are becoming more common in Southeast Asia.
Well, that's the most interesting part, actually. Usually the snake is always seen as the cold-blooded monster, but in this case, humans are to blame. The Washington Post writes that the recent rise in snake attacks in Southeast Asia is the indirect consequence of the world's obsession with palm oil. Basically, plantations have a devastating effect on local ecosystems, attracting rodents and in turn attracting, of course, their predators, snakes and other pythons. In other words, the snakes are not coming after us, the paper concludes. We are coming after them.
OK, I'm not sure if that reassures me, but interesting to note. Clément Bonnereau, thanks so much for that wrap-up of the world papers.